No offense, Piers, but I don't think a single one of your family members fought for the right of people to burn your nation's flag that they were fighting
Actually,
for.
I think they did.
For a second.
I would say
any more
they
than I
did.
believe that my countrymen and my family members were fighting in wars so that we could have more gay butt sex and more freedom to go and make sure that we can have gay pride parades. I don't believe it for a second. I don't believe they were fighting for trans rights. I don't believe it.
No,
I don't
you're
believe
missing
any
the
of your
point.
countrymen stormed Germany for trans rights. And
They
for
were
flag
fighting.
burning.
They were fighting.
Today, we're looking at Cenk Uygur versus Andrew Wilson on Piers Morgan's show. Two fiery debates, one on trans rights, the other on free speech and immigration. Let's break down why Andrew Wilson keeps falling apart in both.
This one. Make a scene, call the cops. If all else fails, punch him in the balls. It's an obvious joke. You might think it's crass. You might not want to laugh. But actually, the point he's making is that biological men should not be in women's spaces. What is your view of what's happened to this guy? I mean, J.K. Rowling, who's no friend of Graham Lennon, in fact, has had a pop at him a few times before, said, what the fuck has the UK become? This is totalitarianism, utterly deplorable. Elon Musk calls this he replied to her, it's a police state. What do you think of this?
Yeah. So as you know, look, I maybe some folks on here disagree with trans activists 95% or 200%. I disagree with them about 5% about professional sports. And nevertheless, I've been attacked just as viciously as anyone on this panel. So I get it, guys. I get that trans activists sometimes drive people away. First of all, they don't represent all trans people. Second of all, the bigger problem to me is the hatred that trans people are getting that is irrational. So this guy, when he does the tweets about the smelling and the homophobia and misogyny and all that stuff, I don't care. Those are just his opinions, and no one should ever be punished for their opinions, even if they're terribly obnoxious, right? When he gets into, hey, if you see a trans person in the wrong place, start screaming about them and maybe physically assault them, that depends on the laws in the UK. But if you're threatening violence like that in general, yeah, it might be something the cops should talk to you about. And having nothing to do with your opinions about trans people or anything else, it's just that you're threatening violence. And then this other guy, the dude with the beard here, I mean, okay, so this is a common thing that the extreme right does. Okay, in my mind, there is no such thing as feeling like a woman. And I agree, I don't have that in my mind either. That doesn't mean that other people don't. I don't know why that's such a hard thing for folks to understand. So you weren't born that way, but they were. You think they're just all lying? And why would they be lying? And this whole thing of calling people who don't think like you mentally ill is actually super stupid. It's literally unintelligent, okay? So people think in different ways. They have different proclivities, including sexual proclivities and gender proclivities. If you can't understand that simple concept and you think anyone who doesn't think like me is mentally ill, there's actually something profoundly wrong with you.
All right, Andrew Wilson, there's something profoundly wrong with you.
Yeah, sure. Well, nobody said, what was articulated to you was something which is
Yeah, it's
pure
actually
logic,
kind of exactly what you said.
Well, yeah, what was articulated to you was pure logic, and I'll explain the pure logic. You have no comparison to make as a male for what a female does even feel like. That's how we know it's a mental illness, Cenk. It's really simple. It's the law of identity.
Okay, right here is where Wilson thinks he's making some smart point, but he's not. Saying, you can't know what it feels like to be a woman, so if a man says he does, that's mental illness. That's not logic. That's just nonsense. Look, you don't need to fully understand someone's experience for it to be real. Straight people don't know what it feels like to be gay. That doesn't make being gay an illness. Right-handed people don't know what it feels like to be left-handed, but nobody calls that crazy. Wilson is just slapping the mental illness label on something he personally doesn't get. That's not logic. That's just him refusing to admit other people live different lives than he does.
I hope that you know what logic is, because that's what that is. It's the law of identity. You can't make a comparison for what it is to feel like a female, Cenk. It's not possible, because you're not one. That's how that works. Stop trying to gaslight me. Stop trying to pretend that I don't know what a male is, what a female is. Stop trying to pretend that I don't know what mental illness is. The mark of mental illness is irregularities in behavior. That's how you know what it is, Cenk. How else would you even know?
Cenk?
So, okay, that doesn't make any sense at all, and it defies logic completely. So, first of all, you say, how would I know what's inside their heads? That's my point to you, brother. It just seems like you have trouble understanding simple rational reasoning.
My question to you is, how can you make a comparison?
How would you know what's in a trans person's head? You don't know what's in their head. Instead, what you're doing is a simple concept called projection. Hey, since I feel this way, you should feel this way. And then you start talking about irregularities. No, there's a difference between, hey, someone is detached from reality and is committing violence. Okay, that's a mental illness, regardless of what their background is, right? But when you say irregularities in general, what is regular? And let me guess, you're going to claim that whatever you think is regular and everything else is mentally ill.
It's defined.
And then you call that logic? It's the last thing from logic.
How can you ever identify what mental illness was unless it was irregularity in behavior? It wouldn't even be possible. Not only that, you still didn't address the point.
It's
you
not
never
just
addressed any
irregularity.
actual point. But that would be the process for the identification of mental illness is irregularity in behavior. It's the study of the mind. That's what psychology is. Also, you didn't address the point. How is it that a male could have any comparative cognitive function to know what a female feels like? They can't. It isn't possible. You just said you don't know what's in their heads. You don't need to. I know it's not possible for a male to know what it's like to feel like a female. It's not a possibility.
Okay,
so you think every male feels perfectly masculine?
Check. We're getting. I think we're getting
has
slightly.
nothing to do with masculine.
But you get that that's an absurd point.
But hang on.
Dork, you have no idea what you're talking about.
All right.
So there is no such thing as masculine or feminine.
Given that neither of you think the other has any idea what they're talking about,
My
Literally nobody said anything about
we're drifting. We're drifting. Let me cut it. Time out.
Okay, let's pause here and look back at this whole first clip. Wilson came in swinging with this idea that being trans is mental illness because, in his words, a man can't know what it feels like to be a woman. He calls that logic, but it's not. It's just him saying, if I can't imagine it, it must not be real. That's not logic. That's just his own limits. Think about it. None of us can fully know what it's like to be somebody else. I don't know what it feels like to be gay or black or a woman. But that doesn't mean those experiences don't exist. It just means they're not mine. Wilson takes that gap and twists it into, well, then they're sick. That's not reason, that's arrogance. And this isn't new. We've seen this playbook before. Gay people were called mentally ill for decades. Women who challenged men were called hysterical. Black people fighting for equality were painted as unstable or dangerous. Every time society expands rights, someone shows up to slap the illness label on it to try and delegitimize it. Wilson is just running the same tired script on trans people now. What makes it worse is how he pretends this is all about logic and science, but he never once mentions actual science. If this was really obvious, don't you think doctors and psychologists would agree with him? But they don't. In fact, the medical community has moved away from that framing entirely because they understand trans identities are real. Wilson ignores that because his argument isn't built on evidence. It's built on fear and a need to control the narrative. And you can see it in how he debates. The louder Cenk presses him with simple questions like, how do you know what's in someone else's head? The more Wilson spirals. He never answers. He just circles back to the same point and shouts it louder. That's not how you defend an argument. That's how you cover for not having one. So if you zoom out, what's really happening in this clip is Wilson trying to dress up prejudice as reason. He wants to pathologize people he doesn't understand.
Okay, let's go to our second.
He's right about that. It is atrocious that there's even a proposed legislation that if you burn the Israeli flag, you can go to jail. Has nothing to do with American symbolism. Has nothing to do with our flag. We have the Stars and Stripes, which men have died and bled for hundreds of years. Immigrants don't get to come here, many times illegally, and burn it on the cameras as part of a demoralizing system for the public. To hell with that. We don't have to allow that at all.
You don't have to allow it, but Andrew, I would say this.
Shouldn't.
But Andrew, I would say this. You know, a lot of my family served in the UK armed forces in warfare, including in World War II, and they fought for the freedom of people to actually exercise their right to free speech and expression, even if it's very offensive to other people. I mean, isn't that the point of fighting for freedom.
Well, no
is that
offense, Piers, but I don't believe-
you are allowed to then express yourself in ways that other people find offensive.
No offense, Piers, but I don't think a single one of your family members fought for the right of people to burn your nation's flag that they were fighting
Actually,
for.
I think
don't
they
believe it
did.
for a second.
I would
any
say
more
they
than I
did.
believe that my countrymen and my family members were fighting in wars so that we could have more gay butt sex and more freedom to go and make sure that we can have gay pride parades. I don't believe it for a second. I don't believe they were fighting for trans rights. I don't believe it.
No,
I don't
you're
believe
missing
any
the
of your
point.
countrymen stormed Germany for trans rights. And
They
for
were
flag
fighting.
burning.
They were fighting.
Nonsense.
Yeah, but Andrew, they were.
All right, let's stop it here because this is a perfect example of how Wilson argues. Nobody on that stage ever claimed soldiers in World War II were literally storming Normandy for pride parades or trans rights. That's not what Cenk or Piers said. What they actually said was that soldiers fought for freedom of the principle of it, and that principle is supposed to apply to everyone. But Wilson twists it into this cartoon version so he can laugh at it and dodge the real point. That's called a straw man. You invent a fake argument because you can't win against the real one. It's like saying, "Oh, so you think the troops fought for people to smoke weed all day?" No one said that. They fought for freedom, which includes rights that future generations might claim. That's the whole point of progress. It expands the meaning of freedom over time. And here's where it gets deeper. Wilson's version of patriotism is selective. He wants to honor veterans only when their sacrifices can be twisted into supporting his worldview. But freedom doesn't work that way. Veterans didn't fight so that only people who look like Andrew Wilson or think like Andrew Wilson get to be free. They fought so a society could exist where everyone has the right to live openly, even in ways you personally dislike. That's why Piers and Cenk kept hammering the same point. Freedom includes the stuff you find offensive. Otherwise, it isn't freedom. Notice how Wilson also mocks gay and trans rights directly. That tells you a lot, because if he really cared about freedom, he'd at least recognize those communities want the same thing as anyone else, to live openly without being punished for it. Instead, he treats their existence like a punchline. And in doing that, he shows he doesn't actually respect freedom. He just respects control. His rules, his definition of what's acceptable. The irony is heavy too. He says soldiers didn't die for gay rights or trans rights. But think about it. Soldiers also didn't die for interracial marriage or women's voting rights or civil rights marches. Does that mean those freedoms?
Fighting for the freedom for people to have the freedom to live their lives as they want to lead them. I mean, isn't that the whole point of the World War
but
II
the thing is, it's like you
defeat
have
of
to
the
also
Nazis? The Nazis wanted us all to behave a certain way.
But you
we
also
decided
have to
as a
have
world we're not going to
freedom.
accept it.
But you have to have freedom from the very oppression of the people who are now invading your nation and taking it over, destroying the very things that these people fought for under those symbols.
It's a
you
very
don't have to
powerful
allow
point.
it.
Are the Germans invading America?
No, but Andrew's making
what's going on?
Andrew's making a very powerful point. The people who've come to the United States, people who've come to the United Kingdom, are using the very freedoms that we've granted them effectively to mount an attack on the United Kingdom and the United States. That's what's happening. We have a very delicate, fragile, advanced form of a constitution, a democratic
Through demoralization,
system.
through demoralization, invasion, and abuse of laws, Cenk. It's obvious how. It's so obvious how. How can you
No,
not
it's
see
not
it?
at all obvious. You're just making that
Okay,
up.
well, do you want me to walk you
You're
through
making
it step
it
by
up.
step? How I just
So-
watched in California,
No.
huge amounts of Hispanics, many of whom were illegal, burning our very symbols, doing it with they had a flag which was a combination of the Mexican flag and the American flag. They made it themselves just to do anything it could to shit on our symbols, Cenk. It has been a total invasion here and in the UK,
So-
and you're full of shit.
No, this whole talk of invasion is nonsense. Okay.
All right, so let's talk about this whole second clip. Because what you just saw wasn't really a debate about flags or even immigration. It was about who gets to count as American and who gets to use freedom. Wilson tries to make it sound like burning a flag or being an immigrant automatically makes you an enemy, but that completely misses what freedom is. Freedom doesn't just mean people get to say nice things you agree with. It means they get to criticize the government, protest wars, and yes, even burn the flag if they want. That's literally the point of free speech. And look at the way he frames it, calling immigration an invasion, saying veterans didn't fight for gay or trans rights. What he's really saying is, those freedoms aren't legitimate. But that's the trap. Every generation has expanded freedom to groups that were once excluded. Black people, women, immigrants, gay people, trans people. That's the direction of history. And every time there's someone like Wilson saying, this goes too far, this isn't what freedom means. And every time, they end up on the wrong side of history. The irony is, by trying to police who gets to be free, he's acting closer to the authoritarians veterans actually fought against in World War II. Because fascism wasn't about one flag or one border. It was about crushing difference and forcing everyone to live the same way. That's exactly the energy Wilson brings when he says, you can't burn this symbol, you can't live that identity, you can't be American unless you do it my way. So if you zoom out, this isn't about flags or immigrants. It's about whether freedom means everyone or just the people Andrew Wilson personally approves of. And the second you realize that, his whole argument falls apart.